Good afternoon, everyone. Dave and I have been working on the Active Places redevelopment for the last couple of years. The reason I'm involved, I'm head of GIS at Sport England. I look after our spatial platforms and our GIS solutions. Active Places is one of our largest spatial data sets, so I'm the product owner.
And I'm David Allen. I was the technical lead and solution architect for Active Places on behalf of AtkinsRéalis. And now I'm working with Liz on the support and maintenance phase of the project.
Now, I'm sure that many of you have played sport in the last week. And if it wasn't you, you'll have no doubt taken the kids and stood by the side of a pitch, a pool, a sports hall. Now, those facilities will be within one of the 115,000 facilities within Active Places. And this afternoon, Dave and I are looking forward to showing you how we've re-envisaged Active Places power with the Esri technology stack. So, if you do play sport, if you run, you walk, you cycle, you enjoy getting active, you'll understand that being active is really great for you physically, but it has the power to do so much more. However, it's not currently a level playing field. Too often, people's ability to take part in sport is dependent on their gender, their background, the postcode, or their bank balance. And that's where Sport England come in. Our mission is to make activity accessible to everyone, regardless of who you are. So, how we'll get there? So, we invest £250 million of national lottery and government funding each year, and that's to support sport and physical activity. Through campaigns like This Girl Can, We Are Undefeatable, we advocate for sport and physical activity from a local to national scale. We partner with organisations across the sports sector, from small to large, to help us deliver our strategy, uniting the movement. Our place partnerships are working with the communities who need the most help to get active. They're working with those communities to develop community-led approaches to tackle the barriers they face in getting active. And finally, we work with the planning. Within the planning system, we work with local authorities. And that's to protect, create, and enhance the places and the spaces we all need to be active. So we do all need we need the right spaces in the right places to enable us to get active. But to ensure we have the right places in the right spaces, we need to know where formal sport takes place. And that's where Active Places comes in. So Active Places is the National Sports Facility Database. And as I've mentioned, it contains 115,000 facilities at 41,000 sports sites. Now, that's a lot of data. There's millions of data points within there. Active Places power helps our users. So our users are local authorities, national governing bodies for sport, the wider sports sector. And what APP, or Active Places power, does is it helps them take that data and convert it into the information and the evidence they need to underpin their strategic planning and investment decisions. So, Active Places power can answer a variety of questions. We've got some of them on the slides here. From the very simple, what facilities are there in my area, to the really more complex. So, for example, you'll be aware that the government are planning to build 1.5 million new homes. That's going to create a lot of new communities, and those communities will need access to sports facilities. It's the data and tools within Active Places that is allowing them to plan for those new communities and their existing communities to ensure they have access to the right facilities. So, Active Places power is a centralized resource. We put it at the heart of the sector to ensure everyone talks about sports facilities in the same way. We have a common language. But we also create massive cost savings. For example, we estimate that local authorities save about £1 million each year just by being able to access our data on grass pitches. And that's just one strand of their work on playing pitch strategies. If we multiplied by all the other strands, it's a real cost saver. The tools and the data within active places also secure investment into sport. So my colleagues in the planning team have worked with local authorities, and they have brought £14.4 million worth of investment into sports facilities, and that was in the financial year 2023-24. So I think you'll agree that Active Places is a really powerful tool. We had two challenges, though, at the start of this redevelopment. The first was that Active Places was built on bespoke platforms. That code base was becoming out of date. That was limiting what we could do. It meant that they were costly, time-consuming to manage and enhance. Secondly, our GIS wasn't fully integrated. We knew that GIS had the power to help more colleagues to support our place-based decision-making, but we just couldn't quite leverage the GIS. So those challenges prompted a change. How do you communicate that you want to create a core spatial database and a spatial platform? How do we communicate that really quickly? And that's where we came up with the concept of Lego blocks. So in the middle there, we've got our corporate spatial database. And then next to it, we've got that really big blue Lego block. That's our spatial data platform, our new infrastructure. On the left, we've got the green Lego blocks. So that's Active Places. On the right, we've got our dark blue spatial tools, processes, and spatial data services. Now, they followed really quickly afterwards, after Active Places, because we needed our systems to be able to talk to other systems within the organization. In the middle, we've got our red Lego blocks, and they are all the apps and maps that we are now creating within our new spatial data infrastructure. So they are the things that we could build on, that we could create. So really what was key for Sport England was that we needed a new, centralized, flexible GIS system.
Okay, so Liz has talked us a bit through the concept. Now we're going to look a bit more at what does that actually look like in terms of a solution. So this diagram, I think, will probably have a number of familiar components to probably most people in the room. In the middle here, ArcGIS Enterprise. I'm sure lots of organizations here today will be using that for their spatial data platform, their corporate GIS, maps and apps internally, exactly like Sport England do. And that's delivering that blue section of the Lego blocks diagram you just looked at. On the right-hand side, I'll touch on these just briefly. We've got some bespoke components in here. Liz mentioned there's 115,000 facilities. Every single one of those is reviewed every year with updates being made to them. And there are some bespoke components that we built to enable one of Sport England's partners to manage that data effectively. I'm not going to talk too much about the detail of that, but just bear in mind that accurate data on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side over here, that underpins all of the analysis that we're going to see as we walk through the session this afternoon. Without that accurate data, none of the analytical outputs are able to provide the value that Sport England need. And then over here on the left-hand side, we've got ArcGIS Online. That's what we're using to deliver the public-facing elements of the solution. So that's the Active Places Power website. That's where all of our analytical tools are accessed from. That's where the data is accessed from. And that flow of information moving across the diagram from right to left is what we're looking at this afternoon. So what have we actually done? If I take you through an example here, this is one of the tools we've built for Sport England. It's a Survey 123 form that you can see here, and imagine I'm a planner working for Sport England. I want to know what the sporting provision is like. This is K2, just down the road in Crawley. And I want to understand what additional facilities are available near that location. I can complete the form, fill in some information. So in this case, it's networking analysis. I'm picking some travel modes, some times, some distances, and I'm submitting that survey. Off the back of this survey being submitted, we have some processing that's running in the background, and that's what's doing the analysis. And you can see here there's an Experience Builder app that is loading that analytical outputs, And the screen refreshes as the tool is running in the background, and you'll slowly see the outputs start to appear on the screen. The key for us in delivering this is all out-of-the-box UI. We haven't had to build anything fancy in order to deliver this. And there you can see the tool is run. There's our catchment, those different colors indicating the travel times, and the red dots are all the facilities that have been identified within those travel distances of the K2 leisure centre. In the normal fashion, you can click things on and off. You can interrogate the map. It'll tell me some details about what that facility happens to be. That's nice and interesting. There's also some dashboards associated with this that give me some more detailed analytics. I can download the reports of these dashboards. I can take them away. I can incorporate them in my own reports. That's quite a complicated set of outputs that we've produced there. But there's nothing from a UI perspective you've seen that can't be achieved with Experience Builder or ArcGIS dashboards. But what does it look like under the hood? Again, we'll start over on the right-hand side, that ArcGIS Hub component and enterprise sites. So that's what's hosting the UI that you saw, the demo of the various parameters being completed. And underneath that is Survey 123. That's where we've configured all of our questions. Right? The inputs to our geoprocessing services, they're just questions in Survey 123. That's great for us because it means we can configure those questions really easily. If Liz decides, actually, that analysis isn't quite working properly, we want to change it in some way, we want to add some more detail, that's just an update to some questions to enhance that front-end UI. Once that survey's been submitted, you'll notice there's an Azure API component in here. That's the only bit of custom code anywhere in this solution. And it's doing one very simple thing, transforming a bit of JSON from one format to another to enable us to submit the geoprocessing job. So nothing complicated in that single bespoke piece. Once that transformation has happened, we then have the geoprocessing elements over here on the left-hand side, and that's where the analysis takes place. In our case, in the example of this tool, that's all network analysis. But it really could be anything you can think of. You've got the ArcGIS ArcPy module in there. There's all the other Python libraries that are available with ArcGIS. Additionally, you can add your own. You could, there's nothing to stop you with this pattern, swapping out that geoprocessing component entirely. Use something else, whatever other analytical workflow or engine you want to plug in there. Similarly, I can imagine scenarios where you might want to interface to third-party systems, asset management systems, workflow management systems. The limit is kind of what you can imagine on the left-hand side over here in terms of doing that processing. Now, you will have noticed when the video was running of the tool, you could see the app refreshing itself in the background. And that is all driven by the fact that as the tool is running, you see the arrow running across the middle of the screen there, we're writing all of our result sets as they're generated back into the Survey 123 feature services. So each time a little incremental piece of that process is finished, you get another bit of output in the front end. And because we can poll that service and look for changes, we can dynamically update the front end. The other great thing about using Survey 123 for this component is we know who submitted the survey. So we can tie access to all of those result sets to an individual person. And that gives us two benefits. One, Liz doesn't come along to me and say, oh, there's thousands of feature services being generated by all of your processing. How do I manage them? How do I clean them up? What's it costing me? Equally, we can tell our customers, actually, all the information you submit is secure. It's not shared with anyone else. There are certain licensing restrictions. There is potentially commercial confidentiality involved. We're able to reassure our users that their data is secure and accessible only to them. So that's given us our data sets, our answers being written back to Survey 123. And then again, we're back in the Experience Builder and Dashboards piece to present that information to the end user. When Liz and I got to the point of having drawn this out and agreed it, we thought, great, we've got a pattern, it works. We can do this for every single tool we've got. I thought that was easy. I thought that was the difficult bit done. The rest is easy. Write a tool, bit of a Survey 123. When we actually then started building these things, we ran into our second problem. Those are the components listed there that we required to build that single catchment tool. One tool, 55 different app elements, 25 hosted feature views. You can see that's quite a lot to manage. Why is that? Well, as well as 115,000 facilities, there's 15 different types of them, isn't there? So there's sports halls, swimming pools, ski slopes. I think there are even something called an endless ski slope, Liz. That's a massive headache for me as a solution provider to worry about, okay, well, I need slightly different text for each of those different facility types. Maybe I need to display slightly different attributes for them all. How do I build something that caters for all of that change between all of those different types? That's how you get to those numbers. This is where the ArcGIS API for Python came to our rescue. And Will is, I think, going to talk a little bit more about that later. The ArcGIS API for Python has helped us parameterize all of this. So actually, all we had to do was build that single tool for one of those 15 facility types. Once we'd done that and tested it, we parameterized that tool. So we ended up with all of those 55 components under the hood. They're just bits of JSON. And we used the ArcGIS API for Python to auto-generate them all for the remaining 14 and deploy them all. So instead of having to test 15 things times 6, we tested one thing for each tool. We validated the configuration and the parameters with Liz, and then we were able to deploy them. And that's great not from just a delivery perspective, but also a maintenance perspective. When Liz comes along in 6 months' time and says, oh, I want to change this, maybe we need some additional functionality, or the text isn't quite right, I'm able to turn around and say, yeah, that's okay, because that's a few days' work. We've got to change a bit of configuration, and we've got to redeploy something. Doing this manually, I would have told Liz, that's 6 weeks of work and a really loaded test headache, and Liz would have gone away and said, well, that's not very good, I don't like it. That's too expensive. So where we've ended up is we've got a configurable, out-the-box solution available to Sport England that means that they can start to deliver those additional red Lego blocks that Liz has on her roadmap.
So Dave's outlined our tools, but how do we get those out to our users? And that's where we leverage another Esri product, ArcGIS Hub. So what ArcGIS Hub has offered us is the ability to build a complete website, end to end. It's got the GIS tools in there, we've got support materials in there. It covers the whole platform. It also allows us user management. So Active Places is open, it's an open data set. But some of our tools are more complicated, so we do put those behind a sign-up because you're going to maybe need a little bit more training on those. And we can use ArcGIS Hub. It has sign-in, sign-up options for our user management. And the last advantage of ArcGIS Hub is the custom domains. We were an established platform. We had a URL. We could apply that URL to the hub, so we didn't lose our users along the way. And the websites are there, so please feel free to go and explore. Now, it's Dave and I who get to stand up here today and introduce you to Active Places, but it really has been a collaborative approach. On the team here, on the screen here, I have our GIS team. And many of these are in the room today, so feel free to ask them questions at the end as well. So what we did a little bit different, you've all done Agile, we delivered the project in an Agile way, but what we did was we embedded the Sport England GIS team within the AtkinsRéalis GIS team. And we delivered the project as one team approach. Now that really helped because we had some seriously tight deadlines and it allowed us to achieve those deadlines. But also it's paved the way for the future. Sport England now have the power to maintain these platforms. We can look after these tools. But we also have the ability to call on our colleagues at AtkinsRéalis as well. Now this is a small part of the team that deliver Active Places. I have to mention the wider Active Places team at AtkinsRéalis. I have to mention my planning colleagues within Sport England who help with developing these tools. But also as Dave's mentioned, we have 115,000 facilities within there. So there's a large amount of teamwork with our data team at Adetic and our site custodians who maintain that data. So delivering active places really is a big team effort. So what's the business benefits of this project? Well, the Esri technologies have allowed us to really rapidly build an intuitive and user-friendly platform. It's reduced our development overheads. We estimate a savings of around 30% reduction in our development and management costs. And, as Dave's mentioned, the development's quicker. So we're estimating a 15-fold increase in development time for some of the kind of functionality. But it's really given us the capability to flex. We have now a flexible GIS infrastructure, and that's where we can look to the future. So that future is founded on one source of truth. We have a corporate spatial database. We have a flexible infrastructure, which is allowing us to build more apps to support colleagues, to support that place-based decision-making and across the sector. And we can continue to build active places power through new tools, new functionality. So our Lego blocks are going to continue to grow, but I hope you agree that you can see that GIS and active places really are helping to get our nation active. Thank you. Thank you, and now I'm handing over to Will for a deep dive.
Cool, thanks Liz and Dave. That was a really interesting way of automating a workflow to solve real-world organizational issues. So, we've got the next 15 minutes, so I thought we could spend a bit of time getting you started on streamlining and sharing your workflows with Python and ArcGIS. But before we do that, let's have a bit of a recap about the two Python libraries within the ArcGIS stack. Firstly, we have ArcPy. And ArcPy is where you're going to be using a lot of local spatial analysis to do data conversion, management, and map automation. It does require an install with ArcGIS Pro, but it gives you access to the full host of geoprocessing tools that come with Pro. Next, we have the ArcGIS API for Python, and this is really designed to hook into your WebGIS. It allows you to automate a lot of those WebGIS tasks like publishing, editing, and sharing data, as well as supporting some server-side analysis, visualization that you can do in the cloud. Really, I like to see a lot of the functionality in the Python API as a wrapper on the REST API, just allowing you to interact with those endpoints in a programmatic way. So, a bit of a mock use case here. I have a range of mountains and a city. I want to do some spatial analysis to see which mountain might blow up in the future and which of my population areas might be in danger. I then want to make a nice old static map on a PDF, and in that case, I'm going to be using ArcPy. On the flip side, I might want to take my volcano data set, my population data set, put that up in the cloud, make a nice, easy-to-use web application I can then share with my community. I know prizes here, but you're going to be using the Python API. So, before I started this talk, I spent a minute just going through all the different areas in the Esri stack that I've written a line of Python. A bit like those Sporkle quizzes you did when you were meant to be revising, and this is what I came up with. So you can really see it's deeply ingrained throughout many of the tools you'll be using. But we've only got a bit of time, so me and Enda are going to focus in on this area. We're going to try and highlight a nice management-based workflow and an analytical workflow. And we're going to be focusing in on scripting tools and geoprocessing tools, as well as notebooks. So with that, I'll hand over to Enda.
Thanks, Will. So as Will's word cloud had up there, ArcGIS Notebooks are a good way of getting introduced to working with Python and scripting within your ArcGIS environment. But you might be wondering, what are ArcGIS Notebooks? Well, they provide a versatile web-based interface to enable you to perform geospatial data analysis. You can automate workflows, and you can immediately visualize results and data there. It achieves this by combining Python code, on-the-fly visualization, and data tools. It brings in both the ArcPy and the ArcGIS API for Python that Will has mentioned, and you can perform a range of tasks from administration tasks, such as you can check your ArcGIS Online credits, all the way up to working with spatial data science tools and even some machine learning workflows. And you can work with ArcGIS Notebooks in ArcGIS Enterprise or ArcGIS Online. There's a few different types of notebooks to cover. We have the standard type, which is really for administration and some light analytics. Then there is advanced. If you're running this in ArcGIS Online, this one would cost 3 credits per hour. This is for large-scale data engineering and some machine learning workflows. And then we have a bit of a jump up to advanced with GPU support. This would cost 30 credits per hour if it's within ArcGIS Online. This is for your more intensive workflows, big data analytics, and model training. So I've talked about it for a while, but I think it's better if we get a quick look at some notebooks. So I've got 2 here that I've put together quite simply from adding in code snippets that Esri have curated and adding in content that I've already got published in my ArcGIS Online environment. So this one here, for example, I have a couple of functions here in my notebook that will help me to check my ArcGIS Online credits. I have one further down. This one here is for querying failed notebook tasks. And then I have one further down for querying portal logs in ArcGIS Enterprise if you're running it within Enterprise. I added these just from clicking on code snippets up above, and there are Esri curated ones that you can have a look and just add these in. It's as easy as just clicking that button and adding it in. Another great benefit is you might want to automate these to run on a schedule. Say you want them to run on a weekly schedule, we can create a task. You can see I've already got a few pre-made, but let's say we want to run this on a schedule for Monday morning. We'll just give this a resource tag of admin, as it's a bit of administration work. We can then have a look at our options here. We'll want to go for a week. We'll just tick off the days that we don't want this to run on, and we'll then change this to 8 a.m. And whenever we come on in the morning for Monday, we can get those functions to run and have our outputs as we want. Another key thing to highlight is you can set a maximum runtime for the tasks. This is really useful, especially if you're using those advanced or advanced with GPU support notebooks, as you want to keep, especially if you're in ArcGIS Online, you'll want to keep your credit cost low, and you don't want to have things running indefinitely. So that's just one example. I have another one here, and I have just pulled in, this is just to highlight how easy and intuitive it is to work with notebooks. So I'm pulling in here a base map and then a cycle network, and then I'm just printing out this map. And you can see here I've zoned in on Belfast, and you can see that my cycle network has been added. You're able to click on it within your notebook, see your output, and actually see some of the information provided, if it's traffic-free, what the surface type is like, and the quality of it there. So that's highlighting just the visualization that you're able to achieve in there. In here, I've got a block of code that will output the layers in an item, and I've then got a pre-published feature server that I have pulled in here, and then I'm just listening at the layers within that. And further on down here, we have the output of a feature service that I have turned into a spatially enabled data frame, and I am listing the output of that there. And again, these are from the code snippets provided here, and also this add button. Another key highlight is your already pre-published content or content that has been shared with you. You're able to just add this in with a click of a button, and you can even add in content from things like the Living Atlas or the groups that you're a part of. As well as the code snippets, you're able to create your own code snippets as well to share and collaborate them with other people in your organization. So it really highlights the collaborative nature of ArcGIS Notebooks. Now, if you're thinking you would like to get started with ArcGIS notebooks or to look a little bit further into them, they do come with sample notebooks that Esri provide. And these range from the administration type things that we've discussed. And further on down, we have some crime analysis ones, 3 credits per hour. I have one already opened. It's a routing and directions one about finding the nearest hospital. But you can see here how well documented these samples are to get you off the ground. And it even comes with a table of contents that you can look through if you're, maybe you just want to jump right to the end, right to the middle part. You can just go ahead and do that. So I would really encourage to look over the range of sample notebooks. I'm sure there's something in there if you're just getting started out. I'm sure there's something in there for you to take away. But Will is going to go over a bit more of the ArcPy and the ArcGIS for Python, API for Python. This is just a link to the ArcGIS notebooks. If we run over this too quickly and you're interested, just we'll be at the stage at the end. So over to you, Will, for a bit more in-depth.
Cheers, Ender. So yeah, I'm going to change tack a bit and talk about a bit more of an analytical workflow, and I'm mainly going to be using ArcPy for this. I'm going to show how you can wrap up your spatial analysis in a nice, easy-to-use and shareable way. And there are a few options for this. As Ender showed, we have notebooks. We have the Python terminal if you're feeling risky. But you can also spool up environments. Anywhere, really, you can get a Python environment that has access to the 2 Python libraries. But today, I'm going to be focusing on Python toolboxes and scripting tools. So, what are these? Well, they're a UI-based way of wrapping up your scripts in a nice, easy, shareable package. They allow you to add things like parameter validation, shareable sort of workflows where your users can really access your scripts in a nice tool-based way, and they just act like another geoprocessing tool. I would say the caveat to this is they're not really for scheduling tasks or running standalone scripts. They are designed to really work within a user interface. So yeah, I'd leave that to maybe like a PostGIS script or just a standard Python file. But let's just walk through how we can create one. So first step, obviously, you need some code to run. So create your logic. You then set your parameters in ArcGIS Pro. Run it in Pro. And then you've got a couple of options for sharing it. Like I said, you could package this up into what is called a TPX file. You can then share this with your users who could then navigate to it using the contents window in ArcGIS Pro and just use it like any other tool. Or if you have ArcGIS Enterprise, you could push it up in the cloud, and that would then just act as a standard REST endpoint that users can access, post their jobs, and get a result from. I would say if you're using ArcGIS Online, you can still access this capability, you just can't host it. So let's start by creating some logic. This is a very simple tool I've created that's designed to take some input stops, take a network, and find the best route around those stops. So quite simple stuff. But at the top here, I'm using ArcPy get parameter as text to set my user parameters, and these index values will correspond with my tool's input order in a second. But you can see here, I'm just grabbing my stops, my network, as well as my output, so what I'm actually writing to. I'm then running the logic, which is using the network analysis extension to take my paths, find the best route, and then return me a polyline, which I then just set as my output, and as well as giving the user a nice message to let them know the tool has executed successfully. A few tips for doing this. I'd say stay clear of, well, sorry, not stay clear, but I would personally recommend using an IDE like Visual Studio Code or PyCharm to write your code. And you can actually mock how the user might input a parameter using things like system parameters. And this just allows you to easily code and sort of live debug user inputs. And just following on from that, add lots of messaging. I'd recommend having a separate log file, as well as just nice messages using the ArcPy add message, just to let the user know what's going on so they know your tool's not just hanging for eternity. Cool. So I've got my code now. I've brought it into Pro using the Create New Script Tool option in Catalog. I now need to fill in a bit of information about that using the Properties tab. And this is your metadata. And I would say it's worth spending a bit of time here because this will all get pulled into your tool's help file that the user will see as they come to use it. So yeah, if you want to make it usable and shareable, definitely spend some time here. You then set your parameters, and this allows you to do things like setting the data types. So you can see here, I'm creating a feature set. as well as a network data set as my inputs. I can also tell the tool whether these are required. So I can set this to be an optional or required type, as well as the output. So is this an input or an output, or is it derived? So just setting the directionality for your parameters is quite important. I can then add my Python file in. So this is just linking to the path of my Python script. And then this is just an extension of that validation. So this allows you to actually add programmatic logic to add some extra validation steps onto your user input. So in this case, I'm just adding a minimum of 2 stops for my root tool to work. And you can see here, if my stop count's less than that, I add a nice warning message to tell the user that they've broken it. So I've got my tool. I've run it in Pro. I now want to think about sharing it. So like I said, I can share this as a TBX file, put this on a shared drive, and there we go. I've created a tool. My user could use that out of the box. They could drag it into a model and run that. I would say there's a bit of a limited reach there. You are requiring the user at the end of the day to using ArcGIS Pro, so they will be need to tie to that desktop environment. But what I can also do is push it up as a web tool. So using the Share as Web Tool option in Catalog, I can then publish this to my enterprise. And this really maximizes the reach of your tool. They're no longer tied to that desktop environment and can reach it in a cloud-based, browser-based environment. Anywhere really you can hit that endpoint, you can get to your tool if shared correctly. Again, this does have a bit of a caveat that it does require enterprise to publish and host, but really I'd recommend this if you're just trying to maximize the reach of your spatial analysis. So we've created our tool that routes us around. What can we do with it? Well, a bit of a side note, I live up in the city of Edinburgh. Like every great city, it's built on 7 hills, a bit like Athens. It must be the Mediterranean climate. But I want to know when I'm not writing code, I'm running around and I'm running up these hills. I'm not the only one who's had this idea, as this is a 7 hills race. And this entails everyone running around the city, trying to get to the top of each trig point in any order, any direction, any route. But using the power of geography, I want to see if I can get the upper hand. So I've published my web tool, and now what I'm going to do is jump out into my browser, into Experience Builder. And here I have a very basic Experience Builder application with some nice branding that is designed to hook into my GP service, put it into my widget, and then begin creating outputs that will then be displayed on the map. So kicking that off, that's doing is taking my input hills as my stops. So I've got a few options here, and Experience Builder gives me a really nice way of inputting these. I can choose from layers in the map. I can even start specifying stops using the drawing tools in Experience Builder. For example, if I wanted to add a blocker, I can draw a line. Looks like that bridge is closed. And that will then be inputted as a parameter in my tool. And that's configured in the Builder view. So if I just toggle over here, you can see I have all these options. And these correspond with every parameter I've set up in Pro. I can even set the symbology of my outputs. So that's going to take a couple of minutes. For the sake of time, I'm just going to jump over to my geoprocessing history, a bit like I would in ArcGIS Pro. And this is a run I did the other day. So I've just added it to my map. We can see here. But what I've also done is I've created a notebook in the background that's pulled all my efforts from Strava, which I can toggle in. And then I can then overlay the footpaths. Apologize for the bright lights, but you can see here, I can now, looking at my different efforts, start seeing where I'm going wrong and how I'm getting so lost. But it just shows how you can really wrap up your Python tools, put them up in the cloud, and just wrap them up in these nice user interfaces. Your end user doesn't need to see a line of code. All they see is this nice, easy-to-use user interface that gives you on-the-fly validation and puts your outputs in a nice, accessible platform. So that's all I'm really going to talk about today. Thanks for listening. Like Enda said, we'll be there at the end if anybody wants to ask any questions about how this was achieved. I would say if you want a bit of inspiration, navigate over to the ArcGIS developers site. There's hundreds of code snippets, sample apps, documentation that really walks you through getting started. And at the end of the day, just gives you some inspiration to start automating and streamlining your workflows with ArcGIS and Python. So, thanks for listening.